Welcome, viewers, to part one of our screencast on long-term care issues and Medicaid. My name is Richard Land. I'm an attorney and a member of the Danbury, Connecticut law firm known as Chipman Mizuko. When we talk about planning for long-term care, we're anticipating that you may become too frail to completely take care of yourself, that you'll be incapacitated, and that you'll need help. Where can you get the help, and how can you pay for it? I won't be talking about the need for medical attention or help you need for medical emergencies or temporary conditions or illnesses. No, I'll be talking about help you may need over an extended period for management of the situation while you're challenged by a chronic condition which limits your ability to function. It could be the result of many things, from loss of mental capacity resulting from dementia or a stroke, to loss of physical capacity resulting from injuries from a fall or a stroke, or even severe arthritis or similar conditions. We will not be talking much about young people, and by young people I mean under age 65, who need that kind of help. No, we'll be talking about the frail or incapacitated elderly, and by elderly I mean age 65 or older, who need assistance either at home or in a nursing home setting. When we talk about whether you're deemed to be incapacitated for purposes of needing special help in a nursing home or assisted living, or its equivalent at home, we're talking about how well you're able to perform these 7 activities of independent living. They are eating, meal preparation, medication management, dressing, transferring and ambulating, that's basically just the ability to move around, toileting, and bathing. Typically, if you can't perform 2 or more of these activities for an indefinite, prolonged period of time, you're in need of the type of assistance we will be talking about. And the type of assistance we're talking about can be provided in a number of settings, not just a nursing home, but also at home, or in a community through adult daycare, or in an assisted living facility. There is a range of environments as we get along in years and need help. This presentation, however, will focus on the services that a nursing home or a skilled nursing facility provides, or ways to get the equivalent at home. So our focus right now is care at home or in a nursing home for the frail or incapacitated elderly, that's a person age 65 or older, with a particular focus on the services provided through Medicaid or Title 19 programs. But we'll also be talking about other programs and long-term care insurance as a way to pay for the services. The costs of such services are very significant, and they're not going down. As we prepare this presentation in August of 2017, the average monthly cost of nursing home care in Connecticut is almost $13,000 per month. The actual cost can be much more. If you need this kind of help, how do you pay for it? There are 3 sources: your personal assets, including those of caring family members and friends, long-term care insurance if you're fortunate enough to acquire some, and public assistance. When we talk about public assistance, we usually are talking about Medicaid or Title 19 programs. Medicaid is funded by the federal and state governments. The federal rules provide parameters that the states are required to fit within, but the states do have some latitude to make their own rules, so there can be quite a difference from state to state in how the Medicaid rules are administered and applied. For example, this presentation focuses on Connecticut law. The law of our neighbor, New York, is quite different in some important ways. If you qualify for Medicaid, it covers the costs of doctors and other health care providers. It covers the costs of nursing home care, the costs of prescription drugs, and the costs of hospital care. But it does not cover everything. For example, it won't cover a private room, and it won't cover podiatry and most dental care, and it won't cover over-the-counter drugs. Keep in mind that Medicaid is a welfare program. That means that you can't qualify unless you're considered poor enough. It's means tested with income limits and asset limits. In other words, you can't qualify until you have no significant resources of your own to pay for the help you need. Let's quickly run through the income and asset limitations. This can be very complicated, but let's start out with something very basic, and that is that before you receive Medicaid assistance, all your countable income that exceeds an allowance must be used to pay your uninsured medical expenses. If you're single and you're in a nursing home, your allowance is only $60 per month. They call it a personal needs allowance. If you're at home and receiving aid, the allowance is more because it takes the costs of living at home into account. Generally, in that case, the limit is 300% of the Supplemental Security Income Benefit, which is $2,205 per month in 2017, but there are some exceptions and special adjustments. For now, we won't spend more time on the personal needs allowance for a single person. Also, keep in mind that the term countable income has a different meaning than it has for income tax purposes. It's best for discussion purposes to think of income as all cash and property you receive directly or indirectly. It's not only all the obvious things like wages, interest and dividends, annuities, unemployment insurance, and Social Security, but also it includes awards and prizes and what you receive as an inheritance and gifts. If someone owes you money and is paying the obligation off, that's considered income, whether or not any of it is taxable. Or if you borrow money, the amount you borrow when you receive it will be considered income. There are some exceptions. For example, if your landlord returns your security deposit, that would be excluded. And certain proceeds from a reverse mortgage or home equity loan will be excluded from income if handled properly. So the meaning of countable income is very broad. To review, keep in mind that countable income, which exceeds an allowance, must be used to pay medical expenses. Now let's talk about how the allowance works for a married couple. We use a lot of defined terms when we talk about this. When we refer to the institutionalized spouse, or the IS, that means the spouse who's in the nursing home. And the term community spouse means the spouse who is not in the nursing home. Instead, the community spouse is living in his or her normal home setting in the community. Here's the question. How much of the institutionalized spouse's income must be used to pay for his medical expenses, and how much can be diverted from him to be used by the community spouse for her regular needs? In other words, what kind of allowance is the community spouse allowed to have from the institutionalized spouse's income? That's called the Community Spouse Allowance, or the CSA. It's determined by comparing the community spouse's monthly income, that's the actual monthly income that she gets, with her minimum monthly needs. If the minimum monthly needs of the community spouse is $2,000 and the community spouse's income, actual income, is more than $2,000, then there will be no community spouse allowance. In that case, none of the institutionalized spouse's income can be paid to the community spouse as an allowance. If the minimum monthly needs of the community spouse is $2,000 and her income is only $1,200, then up to $800 can be diverted from the institutionalized spouse's income to the community spouse. That's the community spouse allowance. For the purpose of computing the community spouse amount, all community spouses are deemed to have a minimum need of a little more than $2,000 per month. Actually, the number is $2,029.50 in 2017, so a community spouse's minimum need is deemed to be $2,029.50 a month, which is intended to cover basic shelter that costs $608.85 per month. The question is whether, in your specific case, your specific needs exceed $2,029.50 per month, and if they do, your specific minimum monthly needs allowance can be increased to as much as $3,022.50. Once again, that's in 2017. Let's assume that you're the community spouse and you go through the calculation and you see that your monthly needs exceed $3,500. Well, then you're stuck with the maximum community spouse allowance, which is $3,022.50. So the minimum monthly needs allowance that applies to you would be only $3,022.50. How much can you receive from the income of your institutionalized spouse? We don't really know yet because we need to know your income. If you, as a community spouse, have monthly income of only $1,000, you could receive from the income of your institutionalized spouse up to $2,022.50 per month as your community spouse allowance. If your income were $3,500 per month, you have enough income of your own to cover your needs and you would not receive a community spouse allowance. What follows is a step-by-step description of how to compute the community spouse allowance. It's a bit complicated, the type of thing that might make your eyes glaze over after 15 seconds. If you would prefer to skip the step-by-step calculation, go to part 2 of this presentation now. Otherwise, continue to the end of this part 1. So let's go through this step by step. To compute the community spouse's allowance, which is the amount of the institutionalized spouse's income that may be paid to the community spouse, the first step is to determine the community spouse's monthly needs, and we start with the cost of maintaining her home. That means adding up the rent or mortgage payments, real estate taxes, homeowner's insurance, the utility allowance of $698 in 2017, and common charges if you have a condominium. The second step is to reduce step number 1, that's your personal monthly housing cost, by $608.85, which is the base shelter amount in 2017. That step number 2 gives you the amount by which your personal housing costs exceed the base shelter amount. Let's call that your personal excess housing costs. In step number 3, add your personal excess housing cost, that is the answer you get in step number 2, to the amount deemed to be your minimum monthly need, which in 2017 was deemed by the state to be $2,029.50. The last step, or step number 4, in determining your minimum monthly need amount is to compare your personal monthly need, as computed in step number 3, with the monthly need which the state assigns to you. That's a maximum of $3,022.50 and the minimum of $2,029.50. If your personal actual monthly need, as computed in step number 3, exceeds the state's maximum monthly need of $3,022.50, then your monthly need amount will be limited to $3,022.50. If your personal actual monthly need, as computed in step number 3, is equal to or less than the state's maximum of $3,022.50, but more than the minimum of $2,029.50, then your minimum monthly need amount will be equal to the answer to step number 3. And if your personal actual monthly need as computed in step number 3 is less than the state's minimum of $2,029.50, then your minimum monthly need amount will be the state's minimum of $2,029.50. After you've gone through those 4 steps, you know the community spouse's monthly need or the minimum monthly need amount. To compute the community spouse allowance, you subtract the spouse's monthly need as just computed by the community spouse's income. The answer is the amount of income the community spouse is allowed to receive from the institutionalized spouse's income. That's the community spouse allowance. Here's an example. In this case, the community spouse's income is $800 per month, and her monthly housing costs, computed as just described, are $647.75. That means her community spouse allowance is her monthly housing costs of $647.75 minus the base shelter amount of $608.85 plus the minimum monthly needs allowance of $2,029.50 minus the community spouse's income of $800. That gives you the amount that can be diverted from the institutionalized spouse's income to the community spouse as the community spouse allowance. In this case, the answer is $1,268.40 that the community spouse is allowed to receive from the institutionalized spouse's income.
That's the end of part 1 of this screencast. In additional parts, we will discuss Medicaid asset limits, what assets are counted and what assets are excluded, the community spouse protected amount concept, the consequences of asset transfers, and legitimate ways to plan for Medicaid eligibility. Thank you for viewing.